Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, they say that a week is a long time in politics. Well, it seems that 8 hours is also a long time in politics, because it was just 8 hours ago when I sat here making a video about how the deposit return scheme, that wonderful idea from Lorna Slater, had effectively died. It had withered on the vine. It was no more. It was pining for the fields. In fact, what had happened was even she had admitted that it was no longer viable, it wasn't going to happen, and even she'd given up on it. They had that thing, we're pushing it back until March next year, which, and I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but, you know, somebody has to. I said, the moment that came out that they were pushing it back, that means it's abandoned, it won't happen, they know they can't get it through. So what they do is they say, oh, we're pushing it back, which is political speech for it's abandoned because it's not going to happen. We just push it back far enough, hope nobody notices that it doesn't come into fruition, and then we move on and screw something else up. Anyway, so today I did that video. She admitted it is effectively dead and done. It's not going to happen, and she started blaming the public, the vendors, the retailers, Westminster, the English, aliens, God, you name it. It was everyone's fault except hers. Well, okay, it is her fault. We know it's her fault. She's the moron in charge. She's the one who's come away all the way from her village to be not the the idiot in Holyrood. And so she's sitting there, and now she's looking at a plate full of very, very cold porridge, because she's having to brace herself for the tsunami that is about to hit the Scottish Government. That is compensation. They are braced for tens of millions of pounds of compensation. This will be a massive tidal wave that will wash them away, and hopefully wash the Greens right out of government and take Lorna Slater. Who knows? She might even surf the whole way back to Canada, whence she came. Not that they want her. She's failed here, she's failed there. She can go elsewhere, you know. Anyway, we'll have a look at this. We'll see what's going on and see the sort of claims that will be coming in. But yeah, Lorna Slater will be sitting there tonight, and she'll be going, it just can't get any worse, can it? Oh, I bet it can, though. Life's hard when you're stupid. Here goes. So, deposit return scheme. Ministers braced for millions of pounds in compensation claims. For millions, read tens of millions at least. And this was only launched about an hour ago, so this is fresh, hot off the press stuff. Ministers in Scotland are facing a... Incidentally, before we get into this, just look at this picture. There she is, look. That's Lorna Slater, and she has to wear a green scarf and green cuffs. I always make sure that the collars and cuffs match. But I don't think green should be the colour of choice for her. But, you know, she has to wear green a lot like that because she often forgets what party she's in. And she has to have these little aid memoirs so she knows what she's talking about occasionally. It's very hard. You know, life is hard when you're room temperature IQ like that. Anyway, ministers in Scotland are facing compensation schemes worth millions of pounds from businesses over the deposit return scheme claims. So no, ministers in Scotland are facing compensation claims worth millions of pounds from businesses over the deposit return scheme if, as is now likely, it does not go ahead. It's more or less dead in the water. They have about 10 days for the national government, the UK government, to sort of push it all the way through Parliament, get this, exception to the internal market sorted out, push that through, get all the wording done, get the agreements raised, get the contracts raised, get it all signed, have it agreed in the House of Commons, have it agreed in the House of Lords, then go up to Scotland, have it signed off in the chamber up there, and then to implement that. They have 10, where are we today? The 19th, they've got 12 days, or 11 and a half days left to do that. So no, it's not going to happen, is it? Anyway, organisations representing producers, suppliers, retailers, as well as licensed premises say they will be demanding money back for their members that they've spent preparing for the recycling initiative if that initiative is axed. And the scheme, which met fierce resistance from businesses across Scotland amid concerns over the increase in operating costs, appears of course to be abandoned after the UK government has refused to give the Scottish Government the green light. Competition rules set under the Internal Market Act ensure all businesses across the UK face the same regulations to prevent firms in one part being advantaged or disadvantaged over another. But the Scottish Govt, the SNP, didn't realise that. They didn't know that this was a thing because they're thick. And I've said this before. I'm pretty sure that the SNP, when they go searching for members, and so when I say members, I don't mean all members, but I mean when they go searching for politicians, for councillors or MSPs or MPs or anyone that represents them, or even comes in and things like that. I think they go searching deliberately for the most wide-eyed, boggling, rampant, foaming at the mouth nationalists, and for the least intelligent of them all. They seem to want to pick up and employ the stupidest people who in any other walk of life would never be given any level of authority, and yet they are given authority in the SNP. It's almost like care in the community for some of these people. Anyway, the Scottish Government requires an exemption to the IMA for the recycling programme to proceed north of the border in advance of a similar UK-wide scheme being launched in 2025. Ministers in Edinburgh formally requested the exemption in March, but the UK government has refused to grant it, saying it hasn't been possible to fully assess the impacts of the exclusion request on cross-UK trade, on firms and on consumers. Basically, not enough time, sod off. Now, the other thing is, why won't Scotland wait until the UK-wide one in 2025? Well, the answer's simple. That would be administered from Westminster. And that meant all the control is Westminster. And the SNP have got to go, no, it's got to be our scheme. We must do it. We must be the ones taking the credit for it. I would suggest, if you were wise, which they are not, that their best thing is to let Westminster get on and do it. And then when it crashes and burns, it won't be the fault of the SNP. It will be the fault of Westminster. Because don't think that Westminster are full of intelligent people either. It will come out and it will be doable and it will work, but it will be expensive. It will be open to fraud. It will not do anything like what they think it will do, and it will damage the environment because it's such a terrible idea. Anyway, Lorna Slater, the Circular Economy Minister, whatever that means, responsible for the scheme's delivery, said the exemption was essential to the scheme proceeding, and said if the Scottish Government hadn't got one by the end of this month, it would mean the scheme is unviable. So she's admitting that it is unviable. She's admitting that it wouldn't work anyway, even if Scotland went it alone. Because if Scotland was an independent country, and they didn't need permission, they didn't need the exemption from Westminster, and they just went ahead and did it anyway, it would still be unviable. Because you just have people running south of the border, buying this stuff, going back north and getting their 20p's. And it wouldn't be one or two bottles. It would be on an industrial scale. It is understood that such a decision is unlikely within this time frame, or at all. And Colin Wilkinson, the Managing Director of the Scottish Licensed Trade Association, argued that the Scottish Government should have made sure it had got the IMA exemption before it started to proceed with the scheme. But no, that's what sensible people would do. Sensible people would have a management team involved at the start of any kind of project, and they would look at all the things that were required, the time frame. They'd be sitting there with spreadsheets and Gantt charts, ticking things off, but not the SNP and not the Greens, because morons. Anyway, this gets more farcical by the day. And this is Colin Wilkinson. He said, this gets more farcical by the day. In my view, the Internal Market Act issue is like building a 20-storey tower block, then applying for retrospective planning permission. Who would be so presumptuous? Lorna Slater has effectively torpedoed her own scheme. Businesses have already pulled resources from preparing for the scheme, and it is unlikely they'll revisit it now until the IMA situation is resolved, if it ever is, before the end of the month. And no, it won't be. It is a dead duck. SLTA believes that the supermarkets may be looking at removing drink sales from home deliveries, though they then don't need to comply with the take-back regulations. You can understand why. But what happens to people who rely on home deliveries? It's another potential nail in the coffin for the farce that is the DRS. Yeah, imagine this. Imagine you've got someone who is absolutely reliant on the DRS. Sorry. Imagines, yeah, I mean, he has a point. Imagine that there is someone who is utterly reliant on home deliveries. They could be ill or particularly disabled, or the loss of the ability to drive, some such, anything. There's a myriad of reasons. They absolutely rely on these deliveries, and all of a sudden, they're not going to get a bottle of milk, bottle of orange squash, a bottle of wine, anything like that, because it comes in a bottle. And incidentally, they're talking about bottles as though it's drinks, but what about other bottled goods like vinegar? Is that going to face the 20p? No one's addressed this sort of thing as far as I'm aware. But anyway, they're then going to be able to not get these things. And so you're actually directly harming people by this madness of this scheme. Anyway, earlier this month, he continued, we said that while we welcomed the fact the scheme's implementation had been paused until March 24th, for that read cancelled, it is imperative that this should be used as a window of opportunity to revisit DRS and make it both workable and practicable for both businesses and consumers. Well, they have got a hell of a job if they want to do that, because it isn't ever going to be workable or practicable. If the scheme is cancelled and millions of pounds wasted, the Scottish Government will have to brace itself for the compensation claims that will inevitably start pouring in. Colin Borland, the director of the Federation of Small Businesses in Scotland, said firms would be relieved that the scheme now looks set to be axed. He says, I think people will breathe a sigh of relief if it doesn't go ahead, and then we will need to look at things properly. And by properly, he means I want my money back. We want all the recycling rates to drop. We all believe it should be as easy as possible for the consumer to recycle. So how do we do it? Easy. You make recycling free. Make all recycling free, including industrial recycling. That is the big one. When you're charging people to recycle, it kind of puts a resistance point in. What you should do is encourage everyone to recycle, including businesses. And then when the businesses recycle stuff, that is where you can make money. Anyway, we have the UK government committed to a scheme to come in by 2025. So why not let us have a single UK-wide scheme that works for everyone? There were big issues with this scheme as it stands, and I'm not sure we can ever solve them. But as I say, the SNP don't want a UK-wide one because they don't get the credit if it works, which it won't, but they won't get the credit. Also, they don't have control, and they hate not having control. And also, all this money that goes in and out and in and out, they don't get that. It goes into the government, the UK government, and then it goes out from the UK government. They'll have their own company that does this, and this money goes in and out there. They don't have control over that cash flow, so they can't lift anything. They can't mirage money away, evaporating it, because that is one of the plans. Anyway, he said if it does go, we'll be asking some hard questions about being compensated. The FSB said there have been 664 registrations to the scheme, around 17% of the sector, with registrations costing £365 a year. And that's just the registration money that has to be returned. You've then got to look at those who've geared up, who've bought machinery, vehicles, spent money on property and spaces, and things like that. This is not going to be cheap. This is going to be the other thing, blindingly expensive. Earlier today, the Tories said the Scottish Government is attempting to stoke a constitutional grievance over the scheme. The DRS would introduce a 20p deposit on the price of drinks in cans and bottles, which is repaid to the consumer when they are returned to a retailer or a reverse vending machine. The scheme has come under fire from business groups, and when Humza Yousaf became First Minister, he delayed its introduction from August this year until March next year, so that it could effectively disappear and would never be a problem. Conservative MSP Maurice Golden dismissed Miss Slater's claims as red herring, saying if the scheme failed, it would be the Scottish Government's fault. Yeah, she keeps claiming it would be Westminster's fault, the people's fault, etc. As I covered, and it's like, it's not. It's your fault. It's your fault because you are a moron who came up with a scheme without thinking it through, without looking at consequences, without looking at costs. And that is always a bad thing to do. Anyway, he told the BBC's Good Morning Scotland programme on Friday it is an utterly bizarre intervention, to be honest. It's a red herring on the exemption. My understanding is while an exemption would be welcome, the financial viability of the scheme is not encroached upon by an exemption from the internal market. No, it was never going to be working in the first place, simply because of all the problems with it, all the expenses. One of the biggest expenses was getting the stuff back. And it turns out that this 20p that you pay in, and then you get your money back when you return it. So how does anyone make money from the returns? Because somebody's then got to pay to go and collect those returns and move them somewhere else, to gather them together and then process them and then move them somewhere else, and so on. And it was Biffa, I think, have bought 198 very expensive polluting diesel vehicles just to do all this. Well, I can tell you now, if Biffa's bought all those vehicles, Biffa will be wanting money for that. And so that woman there has just cost the taxpayer, I said tens of millions. I wouldn't be surprised if it clicks over £100 million because of her bright idea. And this is what happens, children, when you let idiots make decisions. Dearie me. I shall round off and come up. You can almost hear the money bags now, can't you? Ching, ching, ching. The counting of coppers and pennies. People rustling down the back of their sofas. Everyone in Holyrood looking for the money in order to pay the compensation before it goes to court. Because if they lose that court case, it will be absolutely embarrassing, humiliating, and ultimately, this could actually be the end of Humza Yousaf. He signed off on this deal after all. I mean, we're all blaming, and I'm blaming, Lorna Slater for coming up with the bright idea, but Humza Yousaf signed off on it. Although, to be fair, the first thing he did do was delay it because he knew he's not an idiot. Well, no, what am I saying? Of course he's an idiot. But even he, stupid as he is, isn't as stupid as her. Even he, with his IQ of a mushroom, realised it wouldn't possibly work. And he sees what she doesn't. So I will give him that one. The first thing he did is, I think, the only decent, sensible thing he's done since becoming First Minister is kicking this into the long grass in the hope it goes away. And it looks like it's going away. So there you go. Well done, Humza. You finally got one thing right in all your years of being a politician. Hooray. You're still an idiot, though. Anyway, we'll round off there. If you like what you see on the channel, please do hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. Definitely leave a like. And until next time, stay safe, stay well. Don't ever, ever, ever vote for the Greens. They're going to destroy us all. And goodbye.